My name is Bill Obrien. At this time, I'm about 92, I think. My dad worked in the fire department. He was in charge of the water department eventually, the installation of new hydrants and water mains for the fire department, but he was ranked as a fire chief. I started in the fire department in 41, 42. I served on the east side at Engine 18, Squad 3, in Mount Elliott and Ellery. And my sister was trying to do some volunteer work, so she started driving ambulances from the plants here in Detroit, or in this area, out to the West Coast as kind of a volunteer. And the guys in the engine house say, "Hey, your sister's doing something for the military there. What are you going to do? Aren't you going to enlist or anything?" And they'd kind of bug me a little bit. So on August 18, 1942, I went down and enlisted in the Naval Air Training System. And from there, it was called January 43, and my military career started. Well, I went over to Okinawa at that time. Right about that time, they were ending the war, too, so the squadron they assigned me to, all those guys had been over there longer, and they sent them home. So it left me there to, kind of put the thing to bed, and then they sent me up to Japan. I went up by boat up to Japan. They dropped me off in Tokyo Bay, and alongside an air station that we had taken over from the Japs on a dark and dreary, snowy, bristly night on a landing boat, and dumped me off at the edge of the air station there. I went up to the bar, which they'd already opened up and settled into, and they had a dome from a B-29, I guess, or a B-17, filled with whiskey and beer and Vitalis and whatever they put in the thing. You had to take a drink, then you were okay. We were still flying planes out of there. And I didn't go into a fighter squadron at that time, so they made me an assistant base operations officer. They gave me the odd job of doing the fire department over there, but we didn't have a fire department on the base. Yeah, I built it with the three other guys. We had a big 6x truck and a big water pump that was used for everything else, and we mounted that on the truck. We didn't have any fire hoses, so I had to put my requisition in for fire hoses. And they sent them up from Guam, 2.5-inch hose, same as all fire departments use. And we put the little pressure on the thing there, and about a half-pound of pressure, and all the hoses flew apart. We were laying around Guam there for years in the hot sun, and they dried rot, and we didn't have any fire hose. We never did put the thing together. So almost the time that I spent with them, I got out in 46, 47, something like that, went back to the fire department. They took me back and sent me out to a fire hall. Trying to remember now, I think they just told me to go back to Engine 18, I think. See if they'll take you, Well, then I went back in the engine house for a short period of time, and somebody suggested, why don't you think about the Fire Prevention Bureau, You've had a little fire experience over there in the islands and whatnot. You've been here for how many years? You're an old-timer now. So I said, sure. I went down fire prevention, a job where I jumped from firefighter to lieutenant. Luckily, I was available to the military for the Korean War. They called me back. They liked what I did, I guess. I have a DFC, a Distinguished Flying Cross. It's a bombing run in Korea on our chosen targets. Just made a couple of good hits on it and give me a medal for it. I was over there a year and a half, and came back. I haven't put in 3 years yet, and they were talking about a 3-year enlistment time, so they sent me down to Kingsville, Texas as a fighter flight instructor down there. Came back to fire inspection, and I don't remember whether I was there any length of time at all to speak of, and I talked to the inspector in charge of the arson squad, Glenn Bennett, who was head of the arson squad. And I said, hey, what's on here? He said, well, I'd like to have you in here. So we made arrangements, and I was transferred over to the Argent Squad.
How long did you stay with the fire department?
25 years.
So you would have been working during the riots?
I was on 2 weeks leave, and our squadron was in Cherry Point, North Carolina when it came in. We were sitting in the bar watching the TV at night, and here's Detroit burning. And the announcer came on, hey, look at it, they got a big riot there in Detroit, look at the fire going, and the pause, and well, the fishing out in the Gulf today has been a little slow. 3 boats report, no catches. That's how much they care about it. So I didn't realize it. So I missed it, and that's at the point when I was going to retire. And they had the food ordered, so when I came back from my 2 weeks, they had it already prepared over at the KFC on the west side where they were going to have my party. We came back during the thing, and they'd already taken our food for my retirement to the fire headquarters. I was still flying fighters at the time I retired from the fire department. It's a Corsair, and really I flew all the planes that they had at the time that the Marines had. I was a dive bomber, a torpedo bomber, a attack bomber, a transport pilot, flew all the planes during my 30 years of service. Landed on aircraft carriers, but not with all those planes. I was a lieutenant colonel. I did have a reserve squadron with 4 planes, 5 planes we had out of Grosse Ile. I was commanding officer there for 2 years, not for the island, but for our Marine Transport Squadron. After 30 years, you proceed up through the ranks as you get older and more experienced, and when I retired, I was a colonel.